The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, swallowed by the thick Georgia night. General Carlton D. Hayes sat behind the wheel, his fingers drumming idly against the dashboard as he exhaled a slow breath. The trip wasn't supposed to take this long. Albany to Americus. 2 hours, maybe less. But now, he was in the middle of nowhere, pulled onto the side of a lonely highway, trying to coax his GPS back to life. The device flickered, the screen flashing uselessly before freezing entirely. Hayes sighed, rubbing a hand across his jaw. Technology was great, until it wasn't. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 10:42 p.m. Dressed in a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and old boots, there was nothing about him that screamed military. No uniform, no insignia, just a man on the road, another driver passing through. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The night was quiet, too quiet. No cars had passed for miles, just the occasional rustling of wind through the trees, the distant hum of insects filling the heavy air. Then, headlights, a pair of them coming fast, closing the distance. Hayes straightened slightly, watching as the vehicle slowed. Something in his gut told him that his night was about to get much, much longer. The headlights cut through the darkness, bathing Carlton's car in an eerie glow. He didn't move, didn't need to. He had been in enough situations to know how this played out. Stay calm, stay measured, let them make the first move. The patrol car had no sirens, just flashing lights, a quiet warning rather than a loud one. Through the side mirror, he saw the silhouette step out. A woman, Officer Tracy Wilburn. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate, a hand resting casually near her holster, not gripping it. Not yet, but close. As she reached the driver's side, Carlton rolled down his window, keeping his posture relaxed, his hands visible on the wheel. The beam of her flashlight swept across his face, then down to his lap, scanning for what? A weapon? A reason? License and registration. No greeting, no explanation, just demand. Carlton's gaze remained steady. Is there a problem, officer? Wilburn's expression didn't change. License, registration. He exhaled through his nose. He had expected this. Keeping his movements deliberate, slow, he reached into the glove compartment, retrieved the documents, and handed them over. I pulled over to check my GPS, he said, his voice calm. Navigation's been acting up. Wilburn barely acknowledged his words as she took the papers. She wasn't interested in explanations. Her eyes flickered across the ID for a second, then back to his face. Something changed. Not recognition, but suspicion. You been throwing things out of your car, sir? Carlton's brow furrowed slightly. Excuse me? She straightened, tilting her head slightly. We've had reports of illegal littering on this road tonight. A lie. There was no hesitation in her voice, no moment of consideration. She had just made it up. Carlton exhaled slowly, keeping his pulse steady. He had to be careful now. Afraid you've got the wrong guy, he said smoothly. I've been driving straight through. Wilburn's lips pressed together like she had been expecting an easier target. Someone who would trip over their words. Someone who would panic. But Carlton wasn't panicking. And that was a problem for her. She stepped back slightly, shifting her weight. Then the real escalation. Step out of the vehicle. Carlton didn't move, didn't react. Mind telling me why? His voice was still calm, but there was an edge now. Wilburn tilted her head, smirking slightly. Because I said so, and just like that, the air changed. The wind had died down, the trees stood still like silent witnesses to what was unfolding. Carlton D. Hayes had been in worse situations. Combat zones, high-risk negotiations, moments where a wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. And yet, this felt different, because this wasn't a battlefield. This was America, and the person standing in front of him, trying to assert dominance, wasn't an enemy soldier. It was Officer Tracy Wilburn, a cop who had already decided what kind of man he was before she even saw his ID. Carlton didn't move, didn't shift. His hands remained where she could see them. I'd like to retrieve my military ID, he said evenly. It's in my wallet, inside the car. A pause. A moment where a reasonable officer would consider that request. Wilburn didn't. Her stance changed, not aggressive, not yet, but controlled, calculated. Her fingers slid closer to her holster, her thumb brushing over the strap. That won't be necessary, she said. There it was. She had no intention of treating him like a citizen, no intention of following protocol. She was setting the stage for something else. Step out of the car, hands on the trunk. Carlton didn't move immediately, not out of defiance, but out of caution. Because right now, the most dangerous thing in the situation wasn't her gun, it was her ego. And men like him had died for less. Officer, I'd like to understand the reason for. Wilburn took a step closer. Her smirk was gone. You got a problem following orders? Her hand pressed against the grip of her gun. And that was the moment. The moment where everything changed. Not because Carlton reacted, but because someone else did. A car slowed on the opposite side of the road. A family, 2 parents, a teenage boy in the back seat. And then, the phone. The kid rolled down his window, raising it, recording. Wilburn saw it too, and suddenly she had an audience. Carlton D. Hayes had spent a lifetime earning his rank. 35 years in service, multiple deployments, tactical command over thousands of soldiers. Yet here he was, being treated like a criminal on the side of a dark Georgia road. And for what? Because a white cop saw a black man and decided he wasn't supposed to be here. Carlton exhaled slowly, keeping his hands visible. He met Wilburn's gaze, steady and unwavering. I am Lieutenant General Carlton Hayes, he said. His voice didn't rise, didn't waver. United States Army. A flicker of something passed over her face. But then she laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. That's so? She sneered. You expect me to believe that? Carlton didn't respond. Because it didn't matter. She had already decided he was lying, and instead of checking, instead of doing her damn job, she did the one thing he had expected all along. She reached for her radio. Dispatch, she said, her voice cool, almost casual. I've got a suspicious male, possibly armed. Possibly armed. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Carlton felt it, the shift. He knew exactly what those words meant. Wilburn wasn't just controlling the situation. She was controlling the narrative. Because now, if something happened, if this escalated, she had already set the foundation. And that was how men like him ended up in body bags. Carlton exhaled, slow, measured. Officer, he said, keeping his voice even. My wallet is in the center console. My military ID is inside. You can check for yourself. Wilburn didn't move, didn't even acknowledge the request, because she didn't want the truth. She wanted compliance. Still, after a long, deliberate pause, she leaned forward, yanking the door open and reaching inside. Carlton stayed still, hands visible. Every movement mattered. Wilburn flipped open the wallet, her fingers brushing over the thick plastic card inside. And then, she froze. The Pentagon's Level 4 security clearance badge gleamed under the dim interior light. It was real, undeniably real. For the first time, Wilburn hesitated. For the first time, she realized she had fucked up. Carlton didn't move, didn't say a word. He just waited. Because now, she had a choice. She could admit her mistake. She could de-escalate. She could do the right thing. But that wasn't who she was. Wilburn's jaw clenched. Her face twisted with something ugly. Not regret, but anger. Not at herself, at him. Because he had forced her into a corner. And people like her, they didn't take well to losing. She shoved the wallet back into the car. Then, with a sharp, deliberate motion, she pulled out her handcuffs. You're under arrest, she snapped, resisting an officer. Carlton inhaled deeply, feeling the cold weight of the moment settle over him. The truth was right in front of her, and it still didn't matter. The metal of the handcuffs bit into Carlton's wrists, cold and unyielding. Officer Tracy Wilburn hadn't even read him his rights. Didn't give him a reason, didn't acknowledge the absurdity of what she was doing. Because it wasn't about the law anymore. It was about power, and she wasn't about to lose. She shoved him toward the patrol car, her grip tighter than necessary. Carlton didn't resist. He had been trained for moments like this. Moments where the only way to win was to survive. The back door of the cruiser swung open. Wilburn's hand pressed against the back of his head, forcing him down. Hard. Carlton's shoulder slammed against the doorframe before he could shift. His teeth clenched, but he said nothing. Because that's what she wanted, a reaction. Something she could twist. Something she could turn into justification. Across the road, the teenager's phone never stopped recording. The boy's hands trembled but his camera stayed steady, the screen glowing with the undeniable proof of what was happening. His father, a middle-aged man in a worn flannel shirt, took a step forward. You're making a big mistake, he warned, his voice carrying over the wind. Wilburn's jaw tightened. She didn't turn to look at him, didn't acknowledge the camera. Because if she did, if she let herself recognize that people were watching, it would make this real. Instead, she reached for her radio. She pressed the button. Her voice was supposed to come out strong. It didn't. "This is Officer Wilburn. I've got—" She hesitated just for a second, just long enough. And that second meant everything, because she wasn't sure what to call him anymore. Not a suspect, not a criminal, not even a threat. She had arrested a high-ranking U.S. military general, and now she was losing control. The inside of the patrol car was dark, but Carlton D. Hayes sat still, his posture straight, controlled. He had been in handcuffs before, but never like this. Not on the side of a road. Not at the hands of a reckless, power-drunk cop. Not for existing. Wilburn stood outside, shifting on her feet, gripping her radio too tightly. The confidence she had carried minutes ago, gone, because the situation was slipping. She could feel it, and Carlton knew it. The flashing lights of another cruiser cut through the night. Deputy Chief David Boyd stepped out, his features etched with annoyance. Wilburn straightened, trying to regain control. "Sir," she started, "I detained." Boyd lifted a hand. "Save it." His gaze flicked toward the back seat, and that's when he saw Carlton, and froze. Carlton watched it happen. The moment recognition settled, Boyd had spent his life around military men. He had seen that face before. "Sir," Boyd said, his voice lower now, measured. "Do you need anything?" Carlton nodded. "A phone call." Boyd hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled his phone from his pocket, offering it through the open door. Wilburn stiffened. "Sir, he's under arrest." Boyd shot her a look. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" Wilburn opened her mouth, then closed it. No, she didn't, and that was her first mistake. Carlton dialed. The line rang once. Then, an answer. A voice, sharp and authoritative. "Commander Reeves." Carlton didn't waste time. "This is Lieutenant General Carlton Hayes, requesting immediate intervention." A pause, then a shift in tone. "Sir?" Reeves' voice sharpened. "Are you in danger?" "Not yet." Carlton glanced at Wilburn, who was trying very hard to look unaffected. "But I expect this situation to escalate." A rustling on the other end. Reeves was already moving. "I'm activating a high-level response. You'll have support within minutes." "Copy that." Carlton ended the call, handed the phone back to Boyd, then leaned back against the seat. He waited. Wilburn swallowed hard because she had just lost control of the narrative. And now the storm was coming. The night was still. Then the roar of engines. Headlights sliced through the darkness, fast and unrelenting. 3 black SUVs, no markings, no hesitation. Wilburn barely had time to react before they skidded to a stop, doors flying open in perfect synchronization. Men stepped out, not cops, military, and leading them, Colonel Errol Gaines. His uniform was crisp, his movements sharp, his presence undeniable. A man who didn't waste time. He didn't look at Boyd. He didn't look at Carlton. He looked at Wilburn, and Wilburn froze. Gaines closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His voice was calm, cold, and edged with authority. "Do you know who you just arrested?" Wilburn opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her throat tightened. This wasn't happening. She had controlled the situation. She had been in charge. Now, she was a speck of dust in a hurricane. She turned, desperate, for backup. Boyd met her eyes, and then, finally, he spoke. "This is Lieutenant General Carlton Hayes." Wilburn stopped breathing. Boyd's voice was steady, leaving no room for doubt. "A decorated U.S. Army general, a man with Pentagon clearance, and you." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You arrested him." Wilburn's world cracked, because now standing in front of her wasn't just an officer. It was the system she thought would protect her, turning against her. Her mouth was dry. She forced herself to speak. I didn't know." Gaines leaned in. His expression didn't change. "You should have." And just like that, Wilburn knew she was finished. The weight of the moment crushed Wilburn's chest. She could feel it, the power dynamic shifting, slipping from her grasp like sand through her fingers. Colonel Gaines stood firm, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "Deputy Chief Boyd," he said, voice steady. "Remove the cuffs." Boyd didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, unlocking the metal restraints around Carlton's wrists. Carlton didn't move right away. He rolled his shoulders slightly, stretching out the tension, before slowly standing to his full height. Then, for the first time since this began, he turned to Wilburn. He wasn't angry. He wasn't threatening. He just looked at her. Wilburn swallowed. Her hands felt clammy. He wasn't supposed to be calm. He was supposed to yell, resist, do something that justified what she had done. But he didn't. And that somehow was worse. She licked her lips, trying to grasp at control. Her voice cracked. She straightened her spine, forcing confidence into her words. He wasn't cooperating. I suspected he had a weapon. A sharp breath. Desperation leaked into her voice. You saw it. He was acting suspicious. Enough. Gaines cut her off without raising his voice, and that stung more than yelling ever could. He took a step forward, not aggressive, but with purpose. You had his military ID, he said, voice low. In your hand. Wilburn's pulse hammered in her ears. Gaines continued, unwavering. You knew exactly who he was. His words were precise, sharp as a blade, and you still acted wrongly. Wilburn's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The flashing red and blue lights flickered against her pale skin. The silence stretched. All eyes were on her. Boyd, the other officers, the family still parked on the side of the road, the teenager with the phone, still recording. And Carlton. Wilburn's breath hitched. She felt it now. The fear. Not the kind she had used to control others, the kind that came when you realized there was no way out. The night was still unfolding, but the world was already watching. It started with a single video. The teenager, still gripping his phone, uploaded the footage before even leaving the scene. By the time Carlton D. Hayes was uncuffed, the clip had already hit social media. By the time Wilburn began to panic, the video had been shared hundreds of times. By the time she climbed back into her squad car, her face pale, it was going viral. General Hayes #racial profiling. The hashtags flooded Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. Millions of views, thousands of comments. A decorated military general gets treated like a common thug. Disgusting. They really put a 3-star general in handcuffs, and she didn't even check his ID? This is why we need police reform. She didn't hesitate. Not for a second. News stations picked it up within hours. Headlines screamed across the internet. Black U.S. general arrested in racial profiling incident. Decorated Army veteran falsely detained by police. How many more times will this happen? The footage played on loop on national broadcasts. The shove, the handcuffs, the unshakable calm of Carlton Hayes, and the panicked unraveling of Tracy Wilburn. Then the real damage began, because social media never stops at one story. People dug deeper. Wilburn's name was searched. Her history surfaced. Pattern of racial profiling, multiple complaints filed by Black and Latino drivers, use of force cases that never led to discipline, and then the final blow. Report dated 3 years ago, Officer Tracy Wilburn accused of using excessive force against a Black teenager during a traffic stop. The case? Sunk, buried, swept under the rug. Until now? Until the world decided to watch. And this time, no one was looking away. The sound of tires crunching against the pavement signaled the arrival of the final reckoning. A sleek black car pulled up to the scene. The door swung open. Chief Roger Nix stepped out. He didn't rush, didn't need to. The damage was already done. Wilburn stood stiff, hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her face was pale, her breathing unsteady. She knew. Nix approached, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations because there were none left to give. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said 5 words. Turn in your badge and your gun. Wilburn's stomach dropped. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had spent her career believing she was untouchable, believing the system would protect her, as it always had. But now, she wasn't a cop anymore. She was a liability, and liabilities get cut loose. Her fingers trembled as she unholstered her weapon. She placed it slowly into Nick's outstretched hand. Then, with the last of her pride, she reached for her badge. The weight of it felt different now. It had once been power. Now it was nothing. She set it down. And just like that, it was over. Wilburn was immediately suspended. By morning, she was fired. Her name became synonymous with abuse of power, a symbol of everything wrong with the system she had once relied on. But Carlton, he never called for her prosecution. He never demanded revenge, because this fight was never about one cop. It was about the system that created her. And that fight wasn't over. Not yet. The stage was set, a packed auditorium filled with veterans, activists, students, people who had watched the video, people who knew what had happened. But Carlton D. Hayes wasn't here for sympathy. He was here for change. He stepped up to the podium, his presence commanding yet composed. The room fell silent. No flashing lights, no sirens, just his voice. I've faced danger before. His tone was even, steady. He let the words settle. I've been on the battlefield, led men through war, risked my life in service to this country. But I have never felt as disrespected as I did that day. The audience held its breath, because this wasn't just about him. They all knew it. Carlton continued, his voice stronger now. We need accountability, we need change, and that can't just happen because of a viral video. A murmur spread through the room because he was right. Outrage wasn't enough. Tweets weren't enough. Firing one officer wasn't enough. We need real reform. His voice cut through the silence. We need a system that holds everyone accountable, no matter their rank, no matter their badge. Applause erupted, not just from activists, from veterans, from students, from those who had seen injustice and were ready to fight back. By morning, his words had spread. School children wrote essays on racial profiling. College students held discussions on systemic accountability. Activist groups launched petitions for independent oversight of law enforcement, because this wasn't just a speech, it was a call to action. And this time, people were listening.